Welcome, everyone, to Monday Night Madness. And we are really excited for our guest that we have tonight. This is my brother-in-law and my nephew-in-law, Seth and Skip Arms. Well, obviously my brother-in-law's Arms and Seth Griffith. But we are excited because this is all about the meat industry. And if you've read the bios on Skip and on Seth, you know that these are experts in their field, period. It was amazing because when I first got to know Skip, he's mind-blowing on everything from blueberries to cattle to chickens to ranches to trees.
Soil, and
It's just like,
yeah.
I don't know where he puts all that information. And if you read the bio, you'll see that he's placed, in the top 20 in the nation. He's just incredibly brilliant. So Skip, we're so glad that you're with us. Seth, we're so glad that you're with us. And they both married to wonderful women. It's just been wonderful to be here with their family. Really, we're so glad that you are with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So do you want to say anything before we kind of jump into some things? What do you want to say?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd love it if we could start off with you two just introducing yourself.
Yeah.
But just so everyone on this call can understand our perspective here and why we're so excited. You've heard it from us 100 times that where your meat comes from matters, but there is nothing like hearing about this topic from a rancher himself or hearing it from the people who are actually working with these animals themselves. And Karen and I grew up in Wisconsin, so we definitely had friends in the cattle industry, and some of them went the conventional farming route of raising their cattle, and others had more of a traditional setup. So we had some exposure there. And then we also have a family out in Utah that has a cattle ranch, and to see how they treat their cattle out there and their free range tactics, we just have noticed there's such a wide variety within this industry, even in the small family farms. It's not just small family farm versus big ag. It's there's a lot of nuance even farm to farm, and so we just are excited to hear from them on just some of the common questions that the average person might have about meat and what to look for and what their experience has been raising cattle for consumption. And that's what I'm really excited to hear from you two, just because you're boots on the ground, like boots in the field working with these animals.
So if you both want to just introduce yourself, that would be a great start.
Okay. Well, I was gonna say right off the bat, of course, I went a little deep in my bio than I have normally in the past. And here's why. I wanted to show people that have read it that I have been in every aspect of this, that not just educated in agriculture, but an educator of agriculture. And when you're an educator, you have to be involved with every aspect of it. And so in that process of educating, there are all kinds of questions, just like going to happen here. I couldn't take sides, and I've never taken sides, but being an educator, you have to learn what the research is. You have to know what everyone's viewpoint is and give the best advice that you can give from every level. But I've not only been on that part of it, but I've also lobbied for agriculture itself. Been in a lobby group. The Farm Bureau is actually a lobby group. I didn't list the Arkansas Cattlemen's Association, all those. And so I'm not someone sitting here that is, hardcore beef producer and he knows everything and has everything, but I've had to, be understand every aspect of it. Let's put it that way. And so as we talk to you here, today, Seth is a cattle producer. That's what he does. And
born and
raised. I've done it for 30 something years myself. I've got practical experience in it. But we're here telling you what we've learned and what we know. And what I hope can happen tonight is, hey, you're invested in it in a certain aspect of it. We're invested in a certain aspect. He's invested in a certain aspect of it. Where can we all meet and come together? This is what we know, and this is what we've learned. What do you know, and what do you learn? What do you want? What do you need? And we'll get into it a little bit later, but I just want to let you guys know, those bios are just a scraping of all the experiences that I've had and Seth has had throughout this business. It's just barely touching the surface. We're born and bred and raised in this stuff, and so it's a lifestyle, and that's the main thing I want to get across to you. It's not just what we know and what we do. It is a lifestyle, and we go at it to maintain that lifestyle. Much probably everybody listening is feeling the same way about their lifestyle. And so we just want to have a good discussion.
It's not a 4-day-a-week job. It's a 7-day-a-week job.
So
yeah, that's what your wife says, Seth. Casey's always like, yeah, he lives and breathes over there. So, well, and before we jump into just asking you a bunch of Q&A and really diving into it, I just want to bring the attention again to how our bodies function. Our bodies function and run off of proteins, minerals, vitamins, so the macronutrients and the micronutrients. And so this is why what we eat matters. If we're looking at our macronutrient consumption compared to our micronutrient consumption, where do the vitamins and minerals come from? Where do proteins come from? You don't breathe them in. You get them from the plants that you eat, or the animals that are eating the plants that are growing from the ground. That's where you get amino acids. So if you're lysine deficient, because you always have viruses, whatever it might be, you are looking at, you need those specific amino acids. Your minerals and your vitamins also come from the ground. So you're looking at the plants that are grown, and this is very key when it comes to looking at your meat and where you're getting your meat from. Your plants that go into the ground, when they plant a seed, whether it be a grass seed, an herb, or a cucumber, or a rutabaga, those seeds that are being planted in the ground, rain is going to land on that seed, release the lactic acid, and then the roots are going to go into the ground. The root is going to go out and search for the minerals needed to grow that plant. Because in order to grow a rutabaga, you need something very different than to grow a pecan tree. And so when the roots go out looking for the minerals needed, cobalt, iron, potassium, sodium, phosphorus, right? All of these minerals, calcium, magnesium, they're in the ground. And if the minerals are not in the ground, then the plant cannot grow a healthy, nutrient, mineral, and vitamin rich product. So when you are looking at where you are getting your minerals from, they're coming from the foods that you eat, your grain, your nuts, your seeds, your beans, right? Your legumes, your vegetables, and your fruits, but they're also going to come from the animals you're eating. Now, I do testing. I'm a holistic healthcare practitioner. I've worked with thousands and thousands of people. And I can honestly tell you, I have seen many meat eaters that are very deficient in amino acids because they're eating crappy meat that is not eating the plants and not getting the nutrients it needs. So there is a difference in meat. And that is why we're so excited to bring Seth and Skip here, because we want you to know why, what's happening behind the scenes, what's happening in the front, what are people cutting out when it comes to farming because they don't want to spend the money on this, but then how does that affect the actual animal? And then all the things we're hearing on, like, I raise our children not eating meat. I don't like meat. I've never liked meat. It's not because I'm vegan. I just don't like, and I just don't eat meat. So our children really were raised with a very few meat dishes in their life, not because it was horrific. I don't like it. So I didn't cook it much, and they lived happily ever after. Many of them eat meat. I've married a husband who, he eats meat. Anyhow, and so we're not anti-meat for those who are coming on, but we are very particular in where we eat our meat. I will eat Seth's meat, and I don't even question. That's one I'll actually, and I haven't eaten much of it because I still don't like meat, but I definitely have made some amazing casseroles with it. And I feel comfortable because I know, and I've been on the property where Seth raises these 1,300 acres where Seth raises his cattle, and the acreage that Skip owns is stunning in Arkansas. And I was also able to see the baby calves being born and right there nursing from their mothers. And those babies are staying with their mothers until the end of their nursing cycle, 9 months later. This is a very humane, incredible practice. And so why is Seth doing that? Why is Skip advocating for that instead of just taking that mother away, taking the baby away and taking the milk for us? So again, there's a lot that goes into meat and the nutrients that come from meat. And that is why we are so excited to have you, Seth and Skip, on the call today.
Hey, I want to go ahead and say something if you've got just a second. And it has to do with what the last thing that you said about taking the calf off of the mother. Really, the only practice where that's going to make you any money in the cattle industry, there's a couple, and that's in the Holstein dairy business. In the dairy business, they're wanting the milk, therefore they need to remove the calf. That doesn't have anything to do with what Seth does for a living. Not one single thing. The dairy industry might as well be construction. It doesn't really have anything to do with what he does. And then also maybe the veal market. You take a calf off and you want to concentrate on getting it processed as soon as he can. And so you have the entire rest of the cattle industry that is, they want the most efficient way a calf can grow is on its mother's milk. And if you keep the calf on for a year, the mother's going to wean it herself. She will. She'll wean it because she's fixing to calve back and have another one. She's going to push that one off. And so in order to prepare for that cow to get that calf off. That calf will be weaned at what, 9 months?
Seven to 9
7 to
months.
9 months, 600 pounds. That's his product. That's what Seth's product is, about a 600-pound calf in 7 to 9 months. Well, that's another 3 to 4 months that cow has to recover its body condition. It's been bred. It was bred right after the calf was born. And so it recovers its body condition and ready to have another calf. And so that's the reason the calves are pulled off at all. So in this segment of the beef industry, that's what he does. It's on there 9 months. It ain't going to last for 12 months. She won't let it. So it's right around the weaning time is when producers that are cow-calf operations, that's what they do at about that time.
Now, why would, oh, sorry, Seth, you want to go?
No, I was just thinking about what I was fixing to say, but I just weaned 25 calves just the other day, this week. And I mean, out of the 25 calves, they're all weighing anywhere from 550 to 7 1/4, and I've over the years bought bigger and better bulls, to make my calves that big, just for this purpose, like trying to be able to make a little bit more money. But now I'm trying to hit it from that aspect of, marketing the beef. That's what, like, I want to be able to have these bigger calves so that I can send to Keith Cagle and Rosebud, to be fed. And, I'm retaining all the replacement heifers that I get, that I can, financially, but I'm getting my feet wet on this whole meat deal. And that's where I'm going. That's where I'm trying to go with it is, marketing meat. So.
Well, and what I was so excited about when I met you, Seth and Skip, when I came to your ranch, was the fact that you aren't using hormones, you're not using antibiotics. There's so many things that a lot of farmers do that you're not doing. And I know that I would love to hear some of the takeaways as why are some people doing, there's so many times they're using antibiotics, so many ranchers do. And I would love you to talk about grass fed. So I know there's a lot to talk about right now, Skip. So I think I'd rather have you kind of lead into that with, traditional farming and some of the awful things that we see on meat.org and the reasons a lot of people don't want to eat meat because of the inhumane treatment. And yet we have these cow whisperers that are autistic who can talk to cows and they're telling you, hey, you always want to walk your cows in a circle. And so many of you are like, well, we're going to do that. We're going to take care of these animals because they're taking care of us. So I think if you can just kind of talk about some of the dark things that happen because you've seen plenty of it. And then some of those things, like you mentioned when we were together, they go viral and that's not the actual thing happening on these farms. So if you don't mind just taking over for a bit, Skip, is that cool with you, Amy? Yeah, that'd be great.
I love the approach. If somebody is taking the side on a subject, the first thing you ask them is, tell me something negative about what you believe in. If they can't tell you anything negative, then you don't really want to talk to them about it because they're not really being honest. I went through a divorce. I said, there's 3 sides to a divorce: her side, his side, and the truth, because neither one of you are speaking the truth. And so when we're talking about a subject like this, there's the good, there's the bad, then there's the truth. Okay, you see what I'm saying? And so that's what we're trying to get to, is what the truth is. And I'm going to tell you something bad about the industry. About 60 or 70 miles from here at a Green Forest sale barn, there's a line of cattle producers with trailers full of cattle waiting to dump their cattle off at the sale barn. Okay, one cow comes out of the trailer and falls down. Okay, now on a hot day, you don't want a bunch of trucks lined up with cattle in it waiting to unload. Okay. So they asked one of the workers to go get a tractor to scoop it up and move it out of the way. He came back with a tractor with a set of forks on it and jabbed the cow through the side, pierced the cow, picked it up, and drove off with it. Now, who do you think got upset about that? Was there any camera people there? Where there was a No. The guys in the trucks behind him jumped out of the truck and started brutalizing him verbally for doing that. Why? Because they care for their animals. And it was a stupid thing to do. That is a horrible thing to do. That should not be accepted anywhere. And to my knowledge, I don't know of anyone that would do that. And that gentleman was fired immediately on the spot. Now, this is just an average everyday sale barn. Seth used to, he still does to a certain extent, market his cattle at sale barns. And so a lot of animals come through there every Monday or every Tuesday or every Wednesday, hundreds and thousands of head without incident. Every cow is treated humanely, as easy as you can for 1,600 pound animals, running them through all day long. That's as well as can be. But something like that is not acceptable. and it's not the right thing to do. Okay. And so that's, as far as the bad part of the industry, those things do exist. But one of the last things I did as an extension agent was to go around farms and had a checklist that the farmer could work cattle. And I would sit there. I actually took kids to do all the checklists because we know they're going to be honest. Did you have any cows while you're working cows? Did you have any cows bawl out? Did you have them holler? Okay. When they came through the chute, did the chute make a lot of noise? When they came out, did they stumble? Did any of them fall? And they wrote down every instance and we did percentages about how safe and how proper the setup that producer had, and we gave them a grade on it. And then we laid out and said, this is what you can do to improve. Every single improvement that we suggested was met properly. And, when you're talking about making improvements to working chutes and things like that, it's very expensive. And so cattle producers don't have a lot of extra cash laying around, but it was 50% or more favorable trying to get those things changed because they want to be as humane as they can and have the herd as calm as they can. 30 years ago when I was working cattle, everybody screamed and hollered during the entire thing, and cattle just running everywhere. Now you work with producers, they don't say a word. They want the animals to be calm. You know why? When an animal's calm and you work them, they don't lose weight. Okay. So you stay calm. It's safer. When you put a dollar amount to it, the cattle producer is going to go, I want to do that. Well, it's also safe. It's also humane, as well. And so those are the types of improvements that are actually being made when it comes to the humane treatment, of the animals. And I don't know if that's where you guys wanted to go with it. But I wanted to say one of the bad things, but also want to talk about one of the good things that's happened in the industry, and is to take care of them and to be humane as possible in this industry.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, Skip, because so often all we hear about is the bad side. And
Right.
people think this the world's getting a worse and worse and worse place in every way. And to hear, there's a lot of metrics where we've actually improved a lot, like in engineering and in just advancements across the board. And I'm happy to hear that in some of these operations you've seen, like they're very receptive to making improvements to create like a more peaceful and humane experience for their animals. That's very good to hear.
Right. And you mentioned hormones as well. The hormones that are used are growth hormones, and it's just to make those animals deposit more meat or to create more meat.
Daily gain.
It improves their daily gain. Well, you say, I don't want hormones. I'm going to walk you through hormones. Remember, I took 4 years of college and it took me 4 years to learn this information. So, doing it in an hour is going to be kind of difficult. But when we use hormones like that, there's 11% more beef made with 20% fewer cattle. 11% more beef is made with 20% fewer cattle using hormones. Okay. And I'm going to explain the hormones part of it here in just a second. And see, he doesn't use hormones. I'm just talking about the good and the bad of this. And so what's bad about hormones? There's a lot of bad things about hormones. I understand why people don't want that. But when it comes to the environment, if you have fewer cattle producing more meat, that's good for one portion of the environment. Now you don't want to ingest those. Well, let me talk something else about hormones here as well. Estrogen is one of the things that people are scared about in beef. My people say my 8-year-old daughter started, into her cycle early because she was eating beef because she got estrogen in the beef. I mean, I hear that. And I understand where you would be scared that would be happening. Well, in a serving, an 8-ounce serving of beef with no hormones, there are 2 nanograms. 2 nanograms of estrogen in an 8-ounce serving of beef. 2 nanograms. You know what a nanogram is? It is a billionth. 1 billionth of a gram. Okay, so there's 2 billionths of a gram of estrogen and non-hormone. There's only 3 nanograms of estrogen in an 8-ounce serving of hormone used on cattle.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's 3 nanograms, and a nanogram is a billionth. Okay, it takes 454 grams to make a pound. All right, so in an 8-ounce serving, that's 227 grams, and there's 1 billionth of a gram, or 3 billionths of a gram of estrogen in one serving of beef. Okay. And a billionth is about, let's say, one blade of grass in a football field. So there are 3 blades of grass in 227 football fields. Okay. In one serving of meat. In, let's say, an egg, there's about 334 nanograms of estrogen in an egg. 3 in beef, 334 in an egg. Okay. In a serving of tofu, 8 ounces of tofu, there are 15 million nanograms of estrogen in 8 ounces of tofu. There's 3 in a serving of beef. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm. Yep.
In an 8-ounce serving of soy flour, there's 58 million nanograms of estrogen in one serving of soy. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And so that's one
Eat more
hormone.
beef.
That's the beef battle.
That's a set of studies that's been around for 40 years.
Mhm.
That's the truth of it. And that's one hormone. We can talk about every hormone. Is hormone the issue there? I mean, I understand what you mean, but the research that went into creating growth doesn't affect those hormones that are harmful to you.
Mhm.
Do you see what I'm saying? And I'll listen to anybody that has a study that says otherwise. That's fine. But that's the way it is. So if you're talking about estrogen, just estrogen alone, there's some facts there that need to be looked at. You also talked about antibiotics in cattle. 99, the beef that goes through the cattle industry winds up on the shelf, 99.9% antibiotic free. Now listen, antibiotic free. I didn't say antibiotics weren't used, okay, but they're antibiotic free. And here's why. Because the industry is, and you can ask him, have those things had any antibiotics or vaccines in the last 30 days, the last 90 days, whatever that withdrawal period that's on the little vaccination bottle, the antibiotic, there's a withdrawal period, and they're not going to accept those cattle and they're not going to slaughter them if they've had antibiotics in the last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever that is. That happens on the farm level, that happens at the feeder level, that happens at the feedlot level, that happens at the slaughter level. Okay? So when you're talking about being antibiotic free, the beef is antibiotic free. Has antibiotics ever been used on it? More than likely, most of what you buy on the shelf, a lot of what you buy on the shelf has had antibiotics used on them for the health of the animal, much like we go to the doctor. I don't know whether you agree with antibiotics or vaccines or anything else, but many people go to the doctor. They inject it straight in their veins, but think it's in the meat. It's not in the meat. Okay. There's the slaughter, the processing industry won't allow it. Okay. And so there's a difference, and that's language. And that's all I'm talking about, language. If there's antibiotics in meat, I mean, I'll accept the proof of it. That's fine. But what the industry does is it makes sure that those withdrawal periods are adhered to so that those antibiotics can work their way out of the system. Okay. That's what the beef industry can do. If it's wrong, if you don't want antibiotics used on any animals that you eat, I've got a man right here that will happily get that animal to you. But when you're in the industry and feed them, those are the protocols that they follow, trying to make the safest product they can to put on the shelf. And so that's kind of the way that we look at it.
And I'm really glad you mentioned that, Skip, because I mean, because I know that we avoid antibiotic, meat, we avoid hormones being added to meat.
Absolutely.
This is what we do. It's what a lot of the people in our health world do, just because we want to, because we know what antibiotics can do to the, microbiome of the animal. And when that's compromised, other things can be compromised. So that's why we love that Seth doesn't use any of that. But I think it's interesting too, because that also makes people like myself, and I'm sure Amy and others, feel better if they're going to go out to a restaurant and they aren't using antibiotic, hormone-free meat. They at least have a bigger perspective at, we have 3 nanograms of estrogen in this meal compared to the eggs that we had 5 of this morning. So I think that is a very great way of viewing it, Skip. And that's why I was excited to have you on, because your brain is rattled with numbers.
Well, if you want as much estrogen in a let's put it this way, in order to get the same amount of estrogen that a grown female, a young woman produces in one day, she would have to eat 42 cows. She would have to eat 42 cows at about 400 to 500 pounds of meat per cow. She'd have to eat 40 cows just to get the same estrogen in her body that she produces each day. Okay. So when it comes down to that type of information, I just say, read the things that you don't normally read. Look at the information you don't normally look at. Look at the research and the folks that, have really back this up. I give you website after website. I'm not on, I can't do it on screen share here, but I wish I could. I've got entire presentations I've done this on. And so that's what we're looking at, and estrogen is just one of them. There's several of them, and I understand, but a producer doesn't want to give an input that doesn't give him an output back. And if you don't want hormones and you don't want antibiotics, I know he's not going to put it in there. Not going to do it. It's not going to make him any money. It could actually wreck him if he does, and he's not going to do it. And so that's, and I like how you talk about big farm, big farm and small farm. Most farms are just families trying to make a living. They could have a $3 million operation. They're just families trying to make a living. And when you get into the processors and the feedlots, I'll begin to, me and you will jump on the same bandwagon. The feedlots are horrendous when it comes to milking this guy out of his money. It's just it's criminal, actually. But I just want to say one more thing as our intro here. He's not going to make money at $1.99 a pound.
Yep.
He's not going to make money. And so, but people look at a producer as just want to make millions of dollars on it. He's not going to make millions, but he's not going to make it $1.99. And those that are listening and some of the other people that I've talked to, you want a safe product. You want something that you can trust, but you're not paying $18.99 a pound for it, are you? Okay. So it's an economy for him, but it's also an economy for you. You want a safe product. I understand that. And the industry absolutely understands it. At what price do you scale back? Will you pay $8.99 a pound? Will you pay $7.99 a pound? Will he take $5.99? Where are you meeting? So when it gets down to it, you want a safe product, but you're not going to pay $20 a pound for it. So then it's actually economic. He wants to produce a safe product, but he's not going to produce at $1.99. So it's economic. So we're both at the economic ends of the production, but where are you going to meet and how are you going to meet? Is he going to be able to make money, or are you going to be able to afford it?
Yeah. Well, Seth, I'm excited to hear from you now on some of your philosophies when it comes to raising cattle. And Skip, that was awesome to hear. So thank you so much for just the education you're providing.
Well, I'm not as good with words as Skip is, but on the whole hormone deal, I'm not going to use hormones. I don't use hormones. I have in the past, and I'll never do it again. The reason why producers use hormones and feedlots and everybody in between, all the middlemen, is because it's a dollar sign. It's the name of the game, dollars. And so if they can give them a hormone to increase daily gain by a third of a pound, over the course of X amount of days, that's money. That's money made. Or a pound a day, an extra pound a day times 120 pounds. So, at whatever cost or price they're getting what they're getting paid for the meat. So, that's why they do it. But I don't use hormones. And if I use antibiotics on one of my beef, it's going to be pulled from my meat program. I'm not gonna continue to feed it. I'm gonna send it to the barn, and then that's where everybody else is. They're gonna fight over it at the barn, and somebody's gonna end up with it, and then it's gonna end up on the store shelf, and nobody's gonna know where it come from or anything like that. And that's the problem with buying beef at the grocery store. You don't know where it come from, what it's had, what it's been exposed to. Product of Mexico. You don't know. I mean, they say that, but you don't know that. So. Anyways, that's kind of where I stand on the product, or on the hormones and antibiotics. Pretty straightforward with that.
Can you tell me what a day in the life looks like? Like, what's your routine and how much attention do these little fellas need?
Well, first off, I got a family at home that I've got to attend to and help my wife take care of. And then, I give hugs and kisses and walk out the door to go feed cows or take care of cattle. during the winter months, it's feeding, and rolling into spring, it's going to fertilize. And that's a whole nother topic right there, fertilize. I know y'all want to talk about that. Skip knows a lot about that.
Yeah.
Go from that into, hay season, producing hay, making hay so that you got something to feed them through the winter, to get the cows through the winter. Without that, there ain't no such thing as a cow-calf producer, because you got to have hay or you got to have feed. You got to come up with it from somewhere. So, just one thing to the next, and you can't really plan because you never know when you're going to have an escapee. You don't know what you're going to be doing from 1 minute to the next, really. I mean, you can try to plan it, but it just don't work out. And Skip knows all about that too. So it's a lifestyle. I chose it. It's my fault.
It's your fault.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that kind of surprises me. So since your family since your cows are all free range, like pasture raised, so you don't they kind of go off and do their own thing, and you're focused on how to keep the pastures growing enough grasses for them, and how to harvest enough of that to sustain them during the winter. Is that right?
There's lots of maintenance in between all that. You got the seasons where you're bush hogging, cleaning the places up. You've got maintenance, picking up limbs, so that you got more grass on the ground, can grow. Tree trimming. My farmhand for the last 3 days has been trimming trees on one of my hay fields, just so I can get an extra 30, 40 foot around the edges of the fields, because after so long, they grow up and, you lose hay ground, and I'm looking to produce more hay. So.
And interesting, Seth, Skip and Seth mentioned this because we're talking about it right now. When I was like, oh yeah, but the big thing is they just want their grass-fed beef. And you were like, yeah, but do you know how many chemicals those farmers are using to spray on their grass? So can you talk about the grass-fed meat industry? Because Seth, you can finish talking about what you're doing, because you're doing what you can to grow more grass naturally. But yet then you got some of these farmers that really don't care as much. They just want to sell their grass-fed beef, quote unquote, but they're not exposing to the world what they're putting on their grass to grow it that big. Yeah.
Well, there's not too many farmers around that don't fertilize. I mean, that's kind of just a dollar signs. It's either they pay money for food, for feed, or, they fertilize and take care of what they have. They maintain what they have. And the best weed protection there is grass. The more grass you got, the more grass you're going to have. Skip knows a lot about fertilizing stuff. I'm not as good with my words as he is.
Because you don't do it.
Now, the number one issue when it comes to smaller farmers, especially larger productions, have economies of scale. They can do a lot more things, have a lot more land, but there's not enough rotational grazing. There's not enough of that, moving cattle often. And so the number one killer of forage is overgrazing. That's what it is. It's called the fatal bite. Okay. Animals should eat grass or forage or whatever they're eating down to about 4 inches. Then the animals need to be taken off. After they eat down to about 4 inches, then from there, they go to their favorite places. So they might go to a place and eat from 4 inches down to the ground and start chewing it off the ground. Well, that they're not eating starts to grow to be 8 to 10 inches. Well, they don't like 8 to 10 inch grass. They like the short grass. So they begin to overgraze those spots. So where you've had a lot of grass and you've left the animals on there for the entire grazing season, they're going to utilize about 30% of the forage. Only 30% of any pasture is used if you do a continuous grazing model. And so with rotational grazing, you let them get the best stuff. That's the top 3 or 4 inches. If it's 8 inches tall, about the top 3 or 4 inches, then you move them off. Okay. And the best thing to do is to go in and knock off the tops of the grass and let it all start at 4 inches and grow to 8 again. And then after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, you bring the cattle back around and you let them eat those 4 inches again, and then you move them out. That is a practice that is very difficult to get a farmer to follow. And here's the reason. He said it a while ago, fencing. You have to have fencing. If you buy 100 acres and you want a rotational graze, you have to build a bunch of fence. You have to move a bunch of fence. You have to do that. And so that's very difficult to get them to do it. And so it's not you don't have to fertilize and you don't have to spray, but you do have to manage your pastures.
Maintain.
You have to manage it to the level. And we did our best. I mean, I did my best for years as an ag agent to get folks, close your gates, build fence, move your cattle often. If you don't like paying for fertilizer, if you don't like spraying the ground, putting pesticides on it, then put your money into fencing. It will be there. It will always be there, and manage your cattle. And so overgrazing, bare ground is the worst thing to have. The best weed killer is a good stand of sod. That's the best weed killer, whether it's your yard, whether it's in your lawn, or whether it's in a pasture. The best weed killer is a good stand of grass. And so that's the issue with eating it down. And so do we spray pesticides? Absolutely. There's a lot of people that do. Can you not spray pesticides? My brother-in-law doesn't, and he hasn't. But you look out through his place, he's got hot wire across there, breaking it up into paddocks and moving his cattle often. And he has a beef. He used to raise Holstein heifers. Now he has a beef farm, cow and calf operation, but he moves them about every day and a half, every 2 days. And he does not have to spray because they utilize everything that's over 4, 6, 8 inches tall.
And this is where I get really excited, Skip, because when I wrote my book and when I talked about meat, the nutrients that are available and all the wild, crazy herbs that are growing out of the ground, they are far superior than the stuff that's being sprayed or fed at a feedlot. And that's what's so important, is like the more crazy and more diverse the herbs that are growing, the cows are loving them, they're eating them, and you are getting diversity in the mineral content of the meat. So again, this goes back to what we opened our entire presentation with tonight, is that you are what you eat. And so if you want more minerals in the diet, if you want more nutrients, you do need to look at the fruits and the vegetables and nuts and the seeds and the grains that you're eating, but you also have to look at the meat. So you're not going to get the nutrient profile from the $1.99 or $2.99 meat you're getting at some crazy grocery store. You go ahead and you buy beef from Seth or a farmer like this, and you use half a pound of it. You're going to get so many more nutrients than you ever would in 1 or 2 pounds, or even more, from these other farmers that aren't using natural, herbs and growth on their farms. I guess I just want that perspective out there. That's why I was excited to do this with you, because you're getting to know me well, because I'm married to your brother, but also, we're in an industry and we're at a time in this country where meat's being villainized, and the more anti-meat stuff they can find, they're throwing it out there. So you're looking at horrible things that are going around on TikTok or Facebook or social media. That may have happened, but that does not define 99.9% of the farmers that are out there.
I want to tell you, over the last 30 years, there's been a lot of changes in the beef industry. There really has. People are going, hey, this is what the consumer wants. This is how we need to do it. Plus, wait a minute, it's good for the soil. It's good for the ground. Imagine that, and so I believe it's changed a lot. But one of the things I was asked, I said, I remember one particular farmer, he goes, what do I put on my Bermuda grass? What kind of fertilizer do I put on my Bermuda grass? I said, you don't put fertilizer on Bermuda grass. He said, what are you talking about? I want to fertilize my Bermuda grass. I said, you don't put fertilizer on your Bermuda grass. He said, what are you talking about? I said, you fertilize your soil. Mm-hmm. I said, I don't care what you're growing. What's in your soil? And so a soil test and understanding what is in the test, what is in the soil. Each plant needs 17 essential nutrients. There's 17. Farmers usually concentrate on 3: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. They concentrate on 3. Okay. Well, when you come down to putting nutrients into a soil, none of the other nutrients are going to be up. There's not going to be an uptake of any of the other nutrients until the one major one with the least amount in it is taken care of. If you're low in nitrogen, until you take care of your nitrogen issue, none of the other nutrients are going to be used. If you're low in phosphorus, none of the other ones are going to be used. If you're low in cobalt, none of the other ones are going to be utilized until you get that level right. And I have a visual of this, a barrel with the staves in it. The shortest stave is going to determine how much water is in that barrel, right? Well, that's the way the 17 nutrients work in a plant. Whichever one has the least amount in it and is deficient in it, that's going to control the uptake of the rest of it. So that's what farmers are learning. We don't need to fertilize grass. We don't need to fertilize forage. We need to find out what's in the soil and protect it. And quit trying to grow things on land that won't grow things. Bermuda grass doesn't do good around here. It doesn't do well at all. And so there's no use growing it in certain areas around here. Don't try to do that. Don't try to fertilize your soil into submission and try to grow Bermuda grass. It's not going to work.
If you have someone who really wants Bermuda grass, it grows great here, by the way, and we don't like it. So I can.
And that's the advice I gave. That's the advice I gave an agent. If you want a Bermuda grass yard, plant it in your garden, and it'll work its way into your yard. Because if you plant it in your yard, it'll work its way into your garden. That's for sure.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
I love it.
Quick question on, you're talking about soil testing. Now, if I just go out to my backyard where I want to grow something and I test the soil there, how accurate is that going to be for that area of my yard? And when you're testing soil, do you grab lots of different samples from the soil and mix it together and then send that in to get like a general assessment? Or do you like have each individual collection assessed and like keep track of what part of the yard it is, like that kind of thing?
I could tell when I was an agent, I could tell by the texture of the sample they brought in, whether they actually did a true sample or whether they stepped inside the gate and stuck the shovel in the ground and put it in the box. You could just tell by the texture of the soil. What we would do at about 10 to 12 plugs, which would be an inch in diameter, 3 or 4 inches long, a plug of soil, about 10 or 12 or 15 of them every 20 acres. And you move around that acre. And if the grass type changes, you probably change soil type as well. So we would have them take samples. It was free to have that tested. And so if you go into your garden, if you're going to plant, let's say you do a row of tomatoes, you're going to plant tomatoes there, take the sample, 5 or 6 or 7 little shovelfuls out there, mix it all together, and then fill your box up and send it in just in that row and label it. I'm going to grow tomatoes. And just like what I was saying a while ago, you're not fertilizing the tomatoes. You're telling the person that's testing the soil, I want to grow tomatoes in this soil. What do I need to do to get the soil in shape in order to grow tomatoes? What do I need to get the soil in shape in order to grow Bermuda grass? What do I need to get the soil in shape in order to grow fescue or whatever else? So move around in the area that you're going to grow a particular thing, and then say what you're going to grow there. And so that's how you test soil.
And go to your county extension office, because we have test after test soil samples here that we've done on the property, and we have 67 acres, and it's just loaded. And we know we have incredibly high magnesium, incredibly high calcium, and we know certain things are very sufficient, but we're low in phosphorus. And so there are things that you aren't going to know unless you do take the time to do all these different soil plugs. But it makes a huge difference, because that's the first thing we did when we got here last year. And then the second thing we did was buy all the amendments and seeds to grow things like red clover, and buckwheat, whatever, to change the phosphorus levels of our soil. So again, it's just really, I think Amy's going to show that
what the report looks like.
Right.
So
and one of the things that you're probably not going to get out of that, a good reading, is organic matter, because it's difficult to figure that into a test. They don't do that well. The organic matter isn't really measured well in a test. And so, monitoring yourself and having a relationship either with an extension agent or someone that knows, keep that organic matter available in there. And if we were row crop people, we'd be talking to you about no-till. We'd be talking to you about things that doesn't disturb the soil, that we can leave, some of the roots there. And if we do till it back in, we till all that stuff back into it. Why? Because organic matter has to be there. The microbes have to be there. And so the thing, it used to be a row crop thing. It's now a cattle thing. It's now a cattle pasture thing. You can't overgraze and overuse your soil.
We have a couple questions that have come up, Skip and Seth, in the comment section. If you could talk about
Wagyu beef.
Yeah, Wagyu beef and regenerative agriculture.
Two different topics.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, say that again. I don't get the question. I'm sorry.
One was just comments on regenerative agriculture, which I think fits piggybacks off the back of what you're talking about.
Regenerative agriculture?
Yeah.
In what area? What are we?
I was in the cattle industry. For example, like there's some farmers up in Idaho that they have, you know, in their crop rotation, they actually have the cattle go ahead so that their dung can get mixed into the soil.
Chickens.
Right.
They've also done it with beef cattle.
The beef
But
cattle.
just talking about how healthy it is that when a cattle's stepping on a soil, it actually aerates the ground naturally just from the
Right.
weight of that cow stepping on the ground. So it naturally aerates the soil, naturally fertilizes the soil just from them pooping.
Right.
And then, and also just like the different microbes and seeds and everything that's brought into an ecosystem. They were just making the point that everyone vilifies the cattle industry, but actually, if you do it right, cattle are some of the healthiest things for the soil.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's actually just, I think it's responsible for about 10% of the ozone killing, whatever ozone. It's only about 10% of it. You know, all the ozone that goes out there that's supposedly bad. It's only about 10% of that. So the cattle industry is pretty good. I was going to have Seth tell you what he did just the other day with his drag and how he feeds his hay out, and he uses drag.
And I still got a lot of other fields to do it with too, but it's just been too wet. I fed some hay here off 65 on a field that hadn't been producing like it should have over the last couple of years, and I had some hay that had some real good grass, like seeds in there, some wild wheat's what it is, and some ryegrass seed in there. And I unrolled those bales out there to the cows and let them eat it in rolls. And I took my chain harrow drag and flipped it over to the rough side, and I let it aerate the ground and mix all the crap and the straw and the seeds and everything else back into the ground so that, you know, hopefully it'll germinate and grow me some better grass. So, you know, and I do that with all my hay fields that I can. I try to rotate them around. Like this year, I've had some hay fields that I hadn't even grazed. You know, they still got 8 to 10 inches of grass in them, and I'm not even going to graze them. I'm just going to let them grow up and cut them for hay this year because I got a good, healthy stand of grass, and I don't want to screw it up. So, but I say, like Skip was talking about Bermuda grass. I've got some pretty good Bermuda grass over at the house, and I've been unrolling my best hay that I have out on it. And I'm running 51 cows in that pasture, and it's all hay field. I've got all the rock and everything cleaned off of it, and you know, I'm waiting for the weather to dry up just a little bit so I can drag it all, and then I'm gonna go back through there and pick up a little bit more rocks, and I'm gonna have me a good hay field to produce some good grass. So, you know, that's the name of the game for me, grass. I'm not a cattle farmer. I'm a grass farmer, and I got to grow grass before I can grow cattle.
Yes.
Wow.
This is so fun. I'm just so glad that you are both here with us. We know that we have about 10 more minutes. So I want to thank everyone for coming, by the way. This is a Monday Night Madness with Amy and Karen. Often my husband Greg is on for comic release, but now he's in a play. And so he's a little busy right now tonight and tomorrow and next Monday and the next Monday and the next Monday. And then you'll get him again. But we just love answering questions and talking about health topics. We actually are part of Holistic Health Educators, and we're actually the co-founders, and we do a lot of public education on the body. And it's so important to understand how the body functions so you can take ownership into how it works. And so you will find us here every Monday night doing Monday Night Madness with special guests, with each other, just having a lot of fun. So please mark your calendar. These are available. This replay will be available with Skip and Seth after it is posted on our blog tomorrow. So you'll be able to send this to friends and family and watch it again if you want to take any notes. So that's where you'll find all of our Monday Night Madness. And then you'll also find those posts on our YouTube channel. Anyhow, so that's kind of just, I want to put that plug out there before we get into the closing remarks so that you all know we are here. I did mention in the chat, for those of you who aren't able to open up the chat, you are able to reach out to Seth, and he is going to sell his meat. He's happy that he wants to sell his meat. He'd like to get a lot more cattle. We are just now going live with his meat. He's just now selling to the public. And so you can message him at info@griffithfarms.com. Is it griffinfarms.com? I put it up in the
Griffin.
Yeah, so it is, I'll spell it out here, where I put it, GRIFFIN Farms, FARMS, meat, griffinfarmsmeat.com. So just putting a plug out there. Amy, you want to say anything before we?
No, Seth, I think that, you know, I'm like, I hear you're a cattle farmer, and I'm just picturing you just like hanging out there with the cattle all day long. And I didn't realize so much of the work you do is to get the soil ready for the grass and to get the fences ready for the pastures. And it's almost like they're just like a totally downstream effect of all this upstream work, you do to create a healthy environment for them to move around and to get, their food just from the ground. So
there's a lot more to it than just going out there and feeding cattle and walking away. There's lots of cases where, just this winter, it's been after dark. I noticed a heifer having a calf. I actually got froze to the ground. My chest got froze to the ground trying to pull the calf. Having problems and everything. I had to take my vest off because it was frozen solid and get in the truck and everything. It's something all the time, but there's a lot more to it than just, producing the beef. There's everything in the steps from whenever that baby calf hits the ground to, whenever you pull the calf, and then the work still don't stop. It really just begins whenever you're trying to sell meat. So there's a lot to it.
Yeah, Skip, what would you have to say about just some observations of like Seth's cattle operation, compared to standard practices?
Well, and he's been married to my daughter for 8 years now.
8 years.
About 8 years now. And I would tell you leaps and bounds. I've seen changes, really leaps and bounds. And that's the difference, I believe, in today's agriculture and 50 years ago agriculture. When I was in college in the 90s, the big thing was, hey, the beef industry needs to change. The consumer's not really liking it. They were putting steaks in the cooler, but the average age of the cook in the kitchen was 12 years old. Well, the 12-year-old doesn't know how to cook a steak, okay? And so they really started looking at the consumer. What do you want? What do you need? And so over the last 30 years, over the last 40 years, I believe there's been a change. And this is one of the things that I told Karen about, and I wanted to mention it before we got off here. Folks, regardless of what you feel about the beef industry, if you want to change, I want to tell you why change doesn't happen very quick in the beef industry. If I want to change the genetics of a chicken flock, a hen flock that's laying, if I want to change the genetics, I can change it tomorrow by changing the rooster. You see what I'm saying? 6 weeks later, the genetics have changed from the chicken that you eat, okay? Now listen to a cow-calf producer. Cow-calf producer, we want your genetics to change. Well, he may have cows with calves already in them, so they got to wait till they calve. Then I get to change my bull. Well, then once my bull gets in there, he takes 3 to 4 months to breed them. Then there's a 9-month pregnancy. Then there's 9 months of growth. Then there's a year and a half of trying to grow that out to the product. So you're talking about 2.5 to 3 years before the genetics even change on one operation. So you talk about steering a ship. Steering the poultry industry is like steering a jet ski. Okay, steering the cattle industry is like steering a yacht. Wow. Okay, because it takes so long to turn the genetics around. It takes every cycle of grass growth to change over a year. It may take 4 or 5 years to improve a pasture. So when you're thinking about the cattle industry, it doesn't change very quick. Of course not, because the gestation period of a calf is 9 months, and it's going to take a minimum of 9 months to change an industry because of the gestation period. That's where it lies. And so what do we need? We need bigger beef, but we need to use fewer hormones. We need to use fewer antibiotics. All that requires change over time. And trust me, they've changed over the last 40 years. Wow. Really have changed over the last 40 years. I think it's getting better. But I see a lot of things happen in the next 10 years that, good old boy farmer ain't going to be able to keep up with. Educated folks like Seth, they're going to be the ones that are going to be your producer.
Excellently said. I watched a thing today. There's a big group of ranchers that are getting together and building a huge center up in northern Utah. And they're doing the same thing, Seth, that you're doing. They're all doing their grass fed. They're doing what no mRNA is being added, no antibiotics, no hormones. They're taking care of their animals. And they're saying the same thing, like, we are your future. We are. And so the questions that are coming in are great. What is organic meat? How do we pick meat at a grocery store? What do we do? Really, you can do your very best you can right now by at least getting an organic meat. There's at least some standard that's a little higher if you can't buy directly from Seth, or if you can't buy directly from places. But Amy, for a while, was ordering meat also and getting it shipped in. She found a farmer that she wanted to use before we had Seth here in the family. And yeah, Arkansas is a 10-hour drive away, but we come back with a bunch of meat for the family and for people here because it's important to us. And so, I think finding your local farmers, finding a way to get, shipments delivered is something you do need to prioritize because it actually matters. It matters more. What was that post? It was a post this morning that my daughter was reading. It was from another doctor who posts some great stuff. And he was like, I should go find it really quick. But it was like, if you don't do something now, you're going to pay for it later. Like Amy's always talking about, and we are too. If you don't take care of your health now, you're going to pay for it later in sick days and disease. And if we don't take care of the minerals going into our body right now, we're not going to have enough of them to keep us from getting sick and ill. So, yeah. I'm grateful. I'm really grateful.
Well, it's just cool, Skip. It's cool to hear, the message of just like, things do change for the better. Things can change for the better. And, I think the best thing that every non-farmer in America can do is learn how to support our farmers and appreciate, well, it's one thing to say that, but is there anything that like we, the people, the consumers can do to make your guys' lives easier? Because I know sometimes you're up against pretty powerful lobbyists and also, I don't know all the dynamics of agriculture, but would you have any commentary on that? Just how we can support people like you doing what you're doing?
As I can tell you, and the separation happens in the feedlot and the packer. That's where the separation happens. The farmer, he's on your side. And I believe over time, over the next 10 years especially, you're going to see the middleman being taken out. And folks, like everyone that's watching today, if you want beef, it's going to be bought directly from him. You can talk to him. He can tell you what you need. And yes, he does have a large enough supply. And I'll tell you, if 100 people come to him and want 100 head of beef, I know he's going to go get it, and I know he's going to grow it the way you want it. That's what's going to happen. People say, I don't have access. There are folks, there are groups out there where you can get beef right out off of the farm. Absolutely. You may pay a little more for it. I agree, but you may pay less. I don't know. But when it comes to the packer, if they can't buy his cheap enough, they'll make his sit in the feedlot. I can't even go through the industry, how that happens. It's absolutely brutal. And so if his is too expensive coming into the feedlot, they are going to ship it in from China. They are going to ship it in from Mexico. They are going to bring it in from Argentina and things like that. The labeling has been in the news for 20 to 30 years. And that's where we're headed is people want to know where it's coming from. And that's going to be the separation. They're going to go, is it coming from an American farmer or is it being imported where we don't have any controls over the production? So.
And I can say, I'm telling you where it's coming from, how it's grown, what it's had, no hormones and no added hormones, and no antibiotics. Like I said before, if I give antibiotics, it's pulled from the program and it's going to be sold at the sale barn. So, there's lots of things that, there's lots of factors in quality of meat and how it's growed and everything like that. Y'all know that as well as I do.
Good.
Well, I agree with you, Skip. A lot of that direct to consumer sale, that's going to help us both out. It's going to help the consumer. It's going to help the farmer. So you can kind of cut out some of those profit margins from the middle guy and just pass it directly onto onto the farmer to do what he needs to do. So
that's a whole hour show of itself. The packing industry is it's horrific. It's horrific.
Wow.
So just getting meat to the shelf, they're brutal. So anyway, it's difficult to go through in just another couple of minutes. So
see, that's like a whole phase. I didn't even realize.
And that's, and we talk in common terms. There's cow-calf producers, there's stockers who take his product and just put them on grass and let them grow a little bit. Then from the stocker, they go onto the feedlot and the feedlot puts them in, in concentrated feeds, and then there it moves on to the packing part of it, then moves on to retail. So there's several areas where you can make money. And even before him, there's seed stock producers where they don't really raise it for market. They're raising bulls with good genetics or raising cows with good genetics. So that's a whole other part of the cattle industry there where they're really not putting out a product to sell for meat. They're just trying to get the genetics for what the industry calls for all the different areas. If he buys a big bull to put pounds on the ground, he's growing good steers, but that's not necessarily good for heifers. If he puts a bull on them that throws good heifers, that's not necessarily good for the meat industry, because the steers are not necessarily going to be big. So figuring out where the genetics are and everything else, it's kind of a mixed deal. And like I said, every 9 months, every 2 years, every 3 years, that's what it takes to turn the ship around and to change an operation. And trust me, they're trying to make a living at it, and it is a lifestyle, and they want to communicate with the consumer and find out what they want, and they want to supply that product.
Wow. Very cool.
Wonderful.
Well, I would love to just go straight into Q&A, if that's okay with you. Just ask you some
Absolutely.
of the chat.
And do you want me to stop the
No,
recording?
look,
Leave it
we
open?
can keep the
Okay,
recording
so it's gonna be a
open.
little bit longer than an hour here, guys, but let's just do a couple of Q&As if you have some things here.
Yeah, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first let's read Angela's comment, because this is straight from family. You want to read that out?
Sure. This is Angela, Skip's wife. When it comes to feeding your family, there are many people willing to join up with you in purchasing a beef. Put it out there on social media. Watch people jump at the opportunity. There have also been a huge increase in homesteading and canning of meat. So if that's something you can do, I highly recommend it.
Yep.
If you want to go in on a cow with someone.
Yeah. So if you want to go into a cow, go in and get one of Seth's cows and just drive down, pick it up. Go home.
Yep.
You know where it came from. You're going to.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite things was when Greg and I first visited Seth, when I went for the first time to visit Seth and Casey and the kids. We come out and I don't know if one of the mothers died at birth, but there was a little cow and a little calf there, and his little 2-year-old or 3-year-old was just feeding this calf, because it needed milk. And like they were there feeding the calf all day, all night, right? And it was just great to see your son out there being a couple of years old, just sitting in there in diaper, just feeding this baby, And I mean, you obviously love these animals. It's so fun.
And that's a good place to start, is go to your county fair. Wherever you live, it doesn't matter where you live in the United States. There's probably a county fair. Go and watch the livestock show. Visit with the kids. You'll see what husbandry is. You'll see how much. And these folks go back home and they raise cattle in order to raise these show animals that they've got. And it's just get to know what those people are like and what their lifestyle is, and you'll understand there's not any big bad guys out there trying to rob anybody. They want to give you a quality product. They really do.
Yeah. I'm glad you spoke about not fertilizing, but taking care of your soil, letting it grow, letting it seed, putting seeds back into the soil. Stephanie's question, which we are very aware of, is that we have really only 6 decades left of healthy nutrition in our soil because of what because of what agriculture is doing and the lack of, natural composting nutrients. And so what are you finding out there, Skip?
And she asked, if you've heard that stat before and do you believe that can be turned around?
I believe that's a stat for right now, but statistics like that don't take into account innovation, invention, change of. I mean, you could have put a 10-year limit back in 1950 or 60 on what agriculture. I remember being in school in the 1970s, and I had a teacher that said, "We're not going to make it to the year 2000. We're all going to freeze to death. There's not enough food." There were 3 billion people on the earth. Now there's 7.5 billion. Okay. And how are we feeding them? Agriculture is feeding them. Are we doing the best job? Well, no. I mean, it's probably not the best job, but we've gone from we're all going to freeze to death and there's not going to be enough land to grow the food to twice as many people. And here we are 40, 50 years later. What did we do? Well, that stat didn't take into account innovation, change of, technology and all of that. You could not have guessed the technology. Many people watching today could not sit in a tractor and operate it, just baling hay. I'm serious. It's just a lot of, there's a lot of technology in farming right now. Go a little too far and forget about what we're doing. Absolutely. Sometimes that happens, but we're going to taking care of the soil now more than raping it like it was in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. There is a change. There is a turnaround.
That's
Absolutely.
awesome.
So that stat does not take into account the technology that could exist. Will it happen? It may. I don't know. I mean, if you know the future, I'm going to bet on you. I'm going to put my money with you, but I don't know how it's going to work, but recycling nutrients is something we've got to do. Just quickly, what he was talking about, rolling his hay out and then the cattle eating it. While they're eating it, not only is the stuff that they're leaving behind, the organic matter they're leaving behind from the hay they don't eat and push into the ground, but also the manure that's there. And then he goes along and scatters it all out. So what he did was he cut hay over in this field. He brought all those nutrients into this field and deposited in this field, and then got the cattle to harvest it and run it through their gut and increase the amount of nitrogen. And that goes back. Well, I mean, that's a win-win situation right there, and that's the way it should be done. So those are things that are happening. I did study after study after study about the benefit of hay being put on ground and being fed, and the cattle, all that recycling going on there. And it is happening. Is it happening enough? I don't know, but it is possible. The nutrients aren't going away. The only thing that's going to go away is if they leach out of the soil and go down into, like, say, the Gulf of Mexico from here. That's one of the things they're trying to improve with buffer areas on streams and waterways. But the main thing is, don't shut the producer down from doing it. Teach him how to do it, because he's going to take care of his soil better than any program's going to take care of it, because it's his land. He doesn't want it stripped. It's his land. So let's teach him how to do it.
I love that, Skip. And a couple of the comments that are in there referenced, Mr. Gates, buying up more.
Don't even get me started.
I know, trust me, but I think we should at least mention it because it's come up, and that, these are all practices Bill Gates does not pursue. I mean, so we just need to be careful and aware of where we're getting our meat from.
Well, I bet for the cameras and the magazines, he does, but behind the scenes, probably not. And that's where, when we're talking, I was talking about the packers earlier and the processors. The four packers own 80% of the beef that's processed. 3 of them are overseas. You see what's happening to our industry? So what the cattle producers are trying to do is say that's unholy. That is absolutely unholy. You're taking all of our business. You're taking all of our money. And so we're left with nothing here. So I think that's where the big ship's going to turn around and go, we don't even going to send them to processors anymore. We're going to sell them straight to the producer. We can do the product. We don't need you anymore. And so that's kind of where that's going. But yeah, I agree with Bill Gates, and we have all these buzzwords and phrases that we can use, and all the horrific things that are going on out there. And they are, to a certain extent, but it's not happening at this level.
Yeah.
It's going to be in those severely corporate farming operations, which are, anyway, there we are.
Yeah, which are starting to be held accountable.
They are. Absolutely.
Well, and the word is getting out there. Where I live, some of the farmers who own land that got sold to Bill Gates, and he's like, all the farmers know what's going on there now, and no one's supportive of it. So the word is getting out there because we're talking. And so that's all. And I do want to comment just quick, Felicia, their meat is grass fed. It's grass raised, it's grass fed, and it's grass finished. There's a couple months that they're adding more minerals to it. But other than that, they're definitely.
Yeah. Do you want to mention that though? Cause didn't you say that, or you told me that there is a phase where adding some grains in can actually be helpful for them, but what is some of your commentary on that?
All right. So, my cattle are, they're great. They graze every day. They're grown on the side of the cows. And then whenever I wean them, they're weaned. I feed them hay and alfalfa. I have me an alfalfa field, and instead of feeding them grain, I feed them alfalfa. That's new. I just did that this last year, but that's what I've been weaning them on. And then I send them to, some people would consider it a feed yard, but it's not. It's Skip, help me out here.
It's a feeding operation, but it's not a feedlot. A feedlot that has no grass in it. They're standing on mud and mounds, and their entire diet is put in the trough. That's not it. They do have troughs, and they are fed, for a supplement, but they also have paddocks that they graze as they do that. So they're grass fed, and when young cattle are taken off their mom and then they are supplemented some with grain to maintain their body condition and don't lose as much weight. But go ahead.
And there's minerals that are in the feed that's fed to them, but it's all necessary stuff.
Still considered natural.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
And then they come back home. That's what
Well,
they come
yeah,
back home.
yeah,
Yeah.
or they get their heads cut off and put in somebody's freezer.
Thank you, Seth, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I hate to be the guy, but yeah, they get their heads cut off. Where do you think it comes from?
That's right.
But-
But a lot, you've told me that a lot of them come home and they'll grass finish there before they go and get harvested. So-
See, the last two, I just took a Tuesday, and I had them home for over 45 days, and I let them graze my alfalfa down until it started getting wet, and then I was like, it's time for y'all to go because I need to get them going to the next and get the ones that I've got weaned, get them onto the next place. So I'm rolling them out of the place there at Rosebud, and they're doing real good. But it's not like a feed yard. I know. If you get online and you look at a feed yard, like Skip's talking about, there's mud. There's mounds of dirt where they push it up because the mud gets so thick. But these cattle are standing out in
Beautiful pasture.
big paddocks, and there's a set of troughs, and they've got a water bin that they get their water from, but they're standing in grass. And during the summer, you go down there, and there's grass that's a foot tall, and the cattle are laying up underneath the shade tree, sitting there chewing their cud. So it's
That's
it's
great.
good.
Yes, so Stephanie said where you're sending it was actually a bovine nutritional fat spa.
That's exactly right.
A little bit of extra fat for that flavor, and then then they're on their way. But yeah, that I can tell the difference in how you're describing that. So
Yeah.
that's very cool. So then would that be considered, someone was just asking, so
Yeah.
that'd be considered grass fed?
And grass finished.
Yeah.
I wouldn't consider it grass finished. And Skip,
Oh,
you
sorry.
kind of, I wouldn't consider it grass finished. There is supplement. They're finished because of the grain. If they were grass finished, it would take somewhere between 24 and 30 months to finish them on grass. My
Okay.
cattle are nowhere near that. Like whenever
Straight grass.
Yeah.
There's not enough grass in the state to grass finish beef. There's not enough time to do that on grass alone. But the difference of what he's talking about here is this gentleman raises perfect ryegrass and rye, and he raises all his own hay. And instead of going down to the market and reserving a truckload of soybean hulls and and corn and all of that, he has all of his own hay, and he mixes all of his own feed, and it's got a lot lower corn content than what it's not your GMO corn and all that, but it does have some in it. But the forage diet is huge compared to anything else. It's predominant. In fact, there's no other cattle that I know of in this area that are raised on so much forage because it is absolutely essential. So they're standing in grass, and it's more than 40% forage in their diet. They're in that trough, which is not most of their diet. Not most of their diet comes in the trough. Feedlot, all of their diet comes in the trough. I really don't like that situation. I know we're feeding a world, and it's okay. I go ahead and eat at McDonald's sometimes. I'm not a big fan of it, but not the entire diet comes in that feed trough. It is a supplement situation based on what they're actually consuming out in those paddocks in the pastures.
It's a 48% forage. So 48% of their diet is not being changed. It's all forage. 52% is the grain, and 52% is the grain, and there is some soy pellets and distiller's grain that's added in on that. But all that is flavor. That's what finishes them. Like I've said, it takes 24 to 30 months to finish a beef that isn't fed nothing else. I just can't do that. And I know if some of y'all have ever had grass fed beef, it's not exactly the best. So not just
if it's only grass fed.
if it's only grass fed. And see, there's a lot of people that grass feed beef that they say it's grass fed, but they're still adding minerals, and they're still adding some additives in there somewhere to add some flavor to them. And, you know, there's just no way around that.
Just to inform you all about the diet of an animal. A growing animal like he is producing, let's say a steer, he sends a set of steers out there. If they're 800 pounds, okay, and they're growing really well, they're consuming about 3% of their body weight, anywhere between 3 to 3.5%. So you're talking about an 800-pound steer eating 24 to 30 pounds of feed a day. When they get up to 1,000 pounds, they're consuming 3% of their body. They're consuming 30 pounds. They're not feeding 24 and 30 pounds of full ration in those troughs. That's not what they're doing. Those calves are going out and eating grass, and then they're supplemented with this. That's a big difference between that and a feedlot. You see what I'm saying? Whatever they don't get in the bunk, they're getting in the grass. You see what I'm saying? So they're only going to come up and consume. I've been there quite a bit. There's feed left in there. Why? Because they're eating all the grass they can eat. They don't need the supplement. You see what I'm saying? They don't need the supplement. So they're not pouring 24 to 30 pounds per animal in the trough and feeding them that way. They're eating grass. Okay. And then they're supplemented there based on whether they're growing properly or not. So, you know, when you talk about an operation, and just think about it, folks, at 100,000 head feedlot, 100,000 head, if the average weight is 1,000 pounds, do the multiplication. That's several million pounds of feed a day. There's 44 trucks pulling in per day into a feedlot dumping grain. And it's just each day, 44 trucks per day. How far out do you have to buy your corn? How far out do you have to buy your distiller's grain in order to have, you know, your feed delivered in June to a feedlot in Kansas where 44 trucks a day are? You see what I'm saying? And so it becomes a cycle. Seth got that on a smaller level. Those cattle have to eat today. They have to grow today. If they don't grow today, he doesn't make money today. Do you see what I'm saying? And so that's where the industry gets stuck. At what point do you stop and go, it's becoming, you know, everything's economical anymore instead of, you know, are we doing the right thing? And so where's that middle ground? Well, while we're trying to figure out what to do, there's hungry animals standing there eating 3% of their body weight a day. And if we don't feed them, what are we going to do? You see what I'm saying? And so it's not grandma and grandpa with, you know, 2 milk cows out there and they get, you know, a little bit of milk a day. It's not that. It's hundreds of animals at a time that need to eat. And when there's bad weather and the grass is gone, what are you going to do? They have to eat.
Yeah.
You know? And so the ground gets eaten, the grass gets eaten to the ground. He tried the best he could, but we've been in a drought, yada, 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 yada. And so when you get into the lifestyle of these guys, you'll understand that the last thing they want to do is lose their ground. The last thing they want to do is grow less grass. They want to grow more grass. Teach me how to do it. I want to learn how to do it, and I'll do those things that I need to do. Sometimes the weather kicks my butt. You know, sometimes the market kicks my butt. You know, sometimes I don't get and so they're doing the best they can. And it happens at this level, not to Bill Gates. He doesn't care, you know. So, but I'm just saying, this is the guy you need to talk to. And there's hundreds, even thousands of them around the country to be ready to sell you some good, healthy meat.
That's great. Thank you, Skip. And that leads us to our very last question is like, where do you recommend finding those farmers? You know, are there like, do you just start asking around in your local area? You mentioned going to, you know, county fairground, but where would you recommend going?
I would go to the county fair. I would begin to seek out agriculture people instead of folks that don't like agriculture people. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes we can get stuck in a group. I can get stuck in my ag guys and forget about the consumer. You know, I've done that at times and find those individuals. I didn't come with a list of websites. I don't search for them, and I guess I should have, but search out custom fed meats in your area, and it doesn't even have to be in your area. With everything going on, there's a guy in Tennessee. He does it. He's in Collierville, Tennessee. There's, you know, and I used to take, as an agent, I used to take producers that do it. There's Kenny Simons is in Conway, Arkansas. I mean, I can give you a list of people just in Arkansas that do it. Go out on Google and say custom fed meats, custom fed beef, custom fed whatever, and begin to research those. They're not going to come knocking at your door because they're too busy fixing fence. You know, they're not going to do that. They have a product and it's out there and they're doing the best they can, and they're improving. It's guys like him that can get on the internet and can be found this way. And so that's what I would encourage you to do. Do the Google search. That's where you should start. Visit agricultural organizations. Don't be afraid to attend a Cattlemen's Association meeting. Go to your extension office. Your extension office will have a list of them. I don't work there anymore, but I would have been able to give you a huge list of custom producers in Arkansas. So
Cool. Well, thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
You
for
bet.
answering
Thank you
all
so
those
much.
questions.
This is just great. It's so important.
Do you have any other questions?
any
Anna?
other questions that went down through there that you guys are wanting?
No, I think we answered all those questions. I think we'll wait. And
Okay.
if they're asking for another discussion, Skip and Seth will definitely let you know because we number one, we love having guests, but also this is a very important aspect.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I see from Jeanette, there's a CAFO equals concentrated animal feeding operation. They're so sad, smelly, and very, very inhuman. And I understand where that, that aura comes from, where that's, most of that is videos that have the worst parts of the industry. But I have many, many, many friends in Arkansas because this is a huge poultry state. Those are confined animals. Those are CAFOs, in a poultry house. You'll have 22,000 chickens in a poultry house, and you can go in, you can see the most horrid conditions, but you can go in them and you can see the most peaceful, the most, productive. And these guys are working their tails off trying to take care of this. I want to tell you, the only reason I'm saying this is not a CAFO. Never will be a CAFO, never has been a CAFO. You're maybe in New England, maybe over in Europe, you'll see where they have entire cow-calf operations. He's over 1,300 acres. Well, it's probably over 2,000 or 2,500 on his total operation, but that's not confined animal. That's not confined at all, but I understand what you're talking about. But in Europe, they'll leave an entire cow-calf operation under a barn and bring them all the feed. That's a confined animal operation. That's not what's going on here. Even dairy is not confined. There are some dairies that are confined animal, and there are lots of improvements that need to be made. But then I ask the question, how else are you going to grow it for a world? How else are you going to do it? And those producers want to know, how else can we do this? But as of right now, this is the way, this is the way it's happening. This is the way it's going down, but how else are you going to do it?
Well, and people, obviously the people have spoken, and I've watched the same changes you have, Skip, in the last 30 years when it comes to meat. And I've also watched it in the vegetable and fruit industry and a lot of industries. People are awake. You wake people up with your dollars. And
Yes.
so stop spending money on cheap quality, cheap meat, and start spending it on better meat, and you will have it. You will find better meat the more you spend money on good food.
Study after study, they've put products on the shelf and it says, this one is just your standard production. This is organic, and then the price is higher. The consumer buys the cheaper one. The consumer buys the cheaper one. The consumer buys the cheaper one. How are you going to convince an industry to change if the consumer keeps buying the cheaper one? You know what I'm saying? So speak with your dollars, speak with your mouth, which like many people are doing. Keep pushing, keep saying, we don't want this anymore.
Yep.
And don't buy the other stuff.
There's the day I walked into Walmart to pick something up and there were hemp seeds on the store shelf. I was like, there's hemp seeds and chia seeds and almond flour. And I was like, well, the world is waking up, so and how did it get there? Because people are demanding it. They're asking for it.
Right. And the difference between organic, natural, and all those different registrations, I could do an entire hour on it. Let's make sure we know what those mean. I was telling Seth before we came on here, there aren't any antibiotics in meat, in beef. 99.9% antibiotic free. Listen to the wording, antibiotic free. That doesn't mean antibiotics weren't used. So when you're going looking on the shelf and you look at natural, you look at organic, you look at antibiotic free, you look at all these things, be sure you understand what those designations mean, because they may say natural, but there are some absolutely non-natural aspects being used in that certification. To be organic is a whole other level, a whole other certification. Understand what those things mean and buy from reputable companies if that's what you're looking for. And so I've been in the middle of all of that. And those certifications, some of them are insanely easy to get when they didn't follow, all of the protocols that they were supposed to. So be sure and pay attention to that.
Well, maybe we'll have you back on for a class where we talk about a lot of those terms, because
love
there's a lot
to.
of terms, even in the health world, that I'm like, no, don't believe that. Don't buy
Yeah.
that. Don't buy it because it says gluten free. Please don't buy it if it says gluten free. There's a reason. Yeah. So there's all these things that, we would love to. So I think we'll have you back for that. That would be really fun.
Yeah, the organic one would be really interesting.
Yeah. The organic destination would be great. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next Monday at Monday Night Madness.